You felt it before. The moment you realize, too late, that you walked straight into something. A sale you didn't need. A question designed to get one answer. A path that only ever led one way. You didn't see the trap until you were already standing in it. But the real answer to where that feeling comes from is far stranger than marketing or manipulation. It comes from a hunt that started hundreds of thousands of years ago, against animals that were faster, stronger, and better armed than you could ever be. And almost none of them got away. Picture a gazelle on an open plain. It can run nearly 60 miles an hour. It can see almost the full circle around its head without turning. It has spent its entire life being chased by lions, hyenas, and cheetahs, and it has survived every single time. Now picture a human standing a few hundred yards away, slower, weaker, almost blind by comparison at night. On paper, the gazelle wins every time, so why didn't it? The answer isn't strength, it's prediction. Humans didn't outrun their prey, they outthought it. And the proof is buried, literally, in the ground. In the 1980s, researcher Louis Liebenberg began living alongside sand hunters in the Kalahari Desert, documenting something modern science had almost forgotten how to do: persistence hunting. A sand tracker doesn't chase an animal in a straight line. He reads hoofprints bent at slightly different angles. He notices a single overturned stone. He follows a kudu for hours, sometimes most of a day, never running faster than the animal, just never stopping. The kudu sprints, rests, sprints again. The human keeps a steady pace the entire time. Eventually, the kudu's body limits it. It can't release heat fast enough through panting alone. The human can, through sweat glands covering nearly the entire body. By the time the animal collapses from heat exhaustion, it hasn't been outrun. It's been outcooled. That single biological difference, the ability to sweat instead of pant, gave early humans a hunting weapon no claw or fang could match: endurance. Biologist David Carrier, who helped formalize what's now called the endurance running hypothesis, has pointed out that almost nothing else in the animal kingdom can do what a human does at a steady jog under a hot sun for hours at a time. Most four-legged predators are sprinters. They're built for a burst of speed, and then they're done. Humans are built for the opposite: slow, relentless, built to outlast, not outrun. But endurance alone wasn't the whole story. The real weapon was knowing, in advance, exactly where the animal would go. Now travel north, out of the desert, into the basalt plains of modern-day Jordan and Saudi Arabia. From the air, archaeologists have mapped thousands of massive stone structures shaped like enormous funnels, some stretching longer than 10 football fields. Researchers, including archaeologist Remy Crassar, who has spent years studying them, call them desert kites. They were built starting roughly 5,000 years ago. Low stone walls forming a wide V that narrowed toward a hidden pit or enclosure at the point. Here's the part that should stop you. Gazelles weren't herded into these traps by force. They were herded by instinct. When a herd panics, it doesn't scatter randomly. It follows the path of least resistance, funneling naturally along whatever barrier appears in front of it. Ancient hunters didn't need to be faster than the herd. They only needed to understand which direction panic would push it. Build the walls along that exact line, and the animals would do the rest of the work themselves. Does that sound familiar yet? Halfway across the world, on the windswept plains of what is now Alberta, Canada, stands a cliff called Head-Smashed-In Buffalo Jump. For nearly 6,000 years, indigenous hunters used it the same way, generation after generation. Bison, despite weighing close to a ton and capable of crushing a human in seconds, share one critical trait with most herd animals. When the group runs, the individual stops thinking. It simply follows. Hunters would dress in wolf hides or buffalo robes, moving just enough to nudge the herd's instinctive fear response in one direction, toward a path that looked to the animal like safety. It wasn't. It was a cliff edge in disguise. The bison weren't tricked by superior force. They were defeated by their own survival programming. This is the pattern, over and over, across continents and tens of thousands of years. Snares built across the one narrow gap in a thicket where rabbits always cut through. Deadfalls placed exactly where a deer's trail bottlenecked between two trees. Pit traps dug along migration paths animals had walked the same way for centuries, because changing the path felt riskier than trusting what had always worked before. Biologists have a name for this kind of behavior. They call it a fixed action pattern, a response so automatic that the animal performs it the same way every time, regardless of whether the situation has actually changed. A rabbit doesn't evaluate the gap in the thicket fresh each time it runs through. It runs through because that's the gap it has always used, and using it has always worked, right up until the moment a snare is waiting on the other side. The behavior wasn't broken, it was simply outdated. the instant a new variable entered the picture. And the rabbit had no way of knowing that. Every one of these animals had a survival instinct that had kept their species alive for millions of years. And every one of those same instincts became the exact thing that ended them, not because the instinct was weak, but because it was predictable. And predictability is the one thing nature never punished, until something finally learned to read it. So what does any of this have to do with you? Your brain still runs on inherited instincts too. You follow the path of least resistance without noticing it, just like that gazelle did. You trust the route that has always worked before, just like that bison herd did, even when something about it has quietly changed. Researcher Daniel Kahneman spent decades documenting this in humans directly, showing that most of your daily decisions aren't made by careful reasoning at all. They're made by fast automatic instinct. The same kind of instinct that once kept your ancestors alive on the savannah, now firing inside a brain surrounded by something completely different. A world built, in many ways, they're made by fast automatic instinct. The same kind of instinct that once kept your ancestors alive on the savannah, now firing inside a brain surrounded by something completely different. A world built, in many ways, like one long desert kite. Think about the last time you opened an app you didn't plan to open. Nobody dragged you there. There was no wall, no cliff, no visible structure at all, but the path had been shaped for you anyway, narrowed gradually, until there was really only one direction left to go. The same way a funnel of stones narrows a herd toward its only remaining exit. You didn't walk into it by force. You walked into it because it felt like the natural way to go. That feeling, the sense that this is just the obvious path, is exactly the feeling ancient hunters were counting on their prey to have. Modern environments are full of these built funnels. A store layout that walks you past the most expensive items before you reach what you actually came for. A countdown timer that nudges a calm decision into a panicked one. A feed that always seems to know which direction your attention will run next. None of these need to be faster than you, or stronger than you. They only need to understand, the way a desert kite's builders understood, exactly which way you'll move once the slightest pressure is applied. Part of why these funnels work so well traces back to a much older finding. In the early 20th century, psychologist B.F. Skinner discovered that a reward delivered unpredictably, sometimes there, sometimes not, pulls at behavior far harder than a reward delivered every single time. A pigeon pecking a lever for an occasional treat will keep pecking long after a pigeon rewarded every time has simply walked away satisfied. You carry that same wiring. A notification that might be something interesting, might be nothing, pulls at your attention the same way that occasional treat pulled at the pigeon's beak. And the same way an open path once pulled at a gazelle's feet. The reward almost never has to arrive. The possibility of it is enough to keep you moving in one direction. This isn't a story about animals being unintelligent. A gazelle's instinct to follow the herd. A bison's instinct to flee from danger together. A kudu's instinct to keep moving rather than stand and fight. These instincts worked, for millions of years, against the predators they evolved to face. The tragedy wasn't stupidity. It was that a new kind of predator had arrived. One that didn't need to be faster. One that only needed to study the pattern long enough to know where the pattern would break. And that's the part most people never stop to consider. Every trap in human history, from a Kalahari heat chase to a 6,000-year-old buffalo cliff, worked for exactly one reason, not violence, not weapons, understanding. The hunters who survived longest weren't always the strongest in their group. They were the ones who paid the closest attention, who noticed the overturned stone, who could read a herd's fear before the herd itself fully understood it was afraid. You inherited that same brain. The tracking brain, the pattern brain. It's still in there, still scanning, still trying to predict what comes next. Because for most of human history, predicting correctly was the difference between eating that night and not eating at all. The only thing that's changed is what's doing the predicting back. For thousands of generations, the brain doing the watching was always on your side. It was the one tracking the kudu, reading the herd, noticing the gap in the thicket before something else could use it against you. Now, for the first time, some of the things watching your patterns aren't on your side at all. They're studying your fixed action patterns the way your ancestors once studied a gazelle's. So the next time you feel that small, sinking realization that you've walked into something you didn't fully choose, remember the kudu in the Kalahari. The gazelles funneled along a 5,000-year-old wall of stone. The bison who ran exactly where they were meant to run. They weren't weak. They weren't slow. They were simply predictable. In a world that had just produced something that finally knew how to read them. You felt it before. That moment of realizing too late you walked straight into something. Now you know the trap is older than memory, older than language, older than the wheel. The only difference is, this time you're standing on both sides of it at once, the tracker and the tracked, and the only real advantage left is knowing which one you are in any given moment.